She was falling. The world, a blur of cloudy sky and grim brick, rushed up to meet her. And in that terrifying, weightless silence, between the shove and the inevitable impact, Sergeant Maya Thorne wasn't thinking about revenge. She was thinking about the hot, gritty sand of Kandahar and how absurd it was that she was about to be killed not by a Taliban sniper, but by 5 American teenagers in varsity jackets. JK, Beachy! Before we witness how this freefall becomes a reckoning, make sure you're part of this story. Subscribe and hit the bell, because what you're about to see is a lesson in never, ever judging a book by its cover. The shove wasn't gentle. It was a hard, two-handed push from the ringleader, a boy named Jake, his Letterman jacket a bright, arrogant splash of blue and yellow against the steel, wool sky. It was a push meant to humiliate, to terrify, to kill. Maya Thorne, the new history teacher who had been at Northwood High for all of 3 days, felt her stomach lurch into her throat. The scream that tore from her lips wasn't faked. It was pure, primal fear, a sound her body remembered from basic training from her first firefight. Tears, whipped away by the wind, streamed from her eyes. For the cameras, for the boys watching, it was the perfect picture of a helpless woman meeting her end. But as the 4-story drop yawned beneath her, a switch flipped deep inside her brain. The terrified civilian persona, the one she'd so carefully constructed for this undercover assignment, was shoved aside by the cold, hard wiring of a U.S. Army Special Forces operative. Time didn't slow down. It became efficient. Her eyes, wide with manufactured terror, were now scanning, calculating. The dumpster. It was her only chance. It wasn't a soft landing, but it was a non-lethal one. Her body, a weapon honed by a decade in the most hostile environments on Earth, reacted before her conscious mind could fully articulate the plan. She twisted in midair, a fluid, controlled motion that defied the chaos of the fall. She wasn't flailing. She was orienting. Her arms crossed over her chest, her legs slightly bent. She aimed for the center of the piled black garbage bags erupting from the metal bin. The impact was a brutal, jarring slam that drove the air from her lungs. Pain, sharp and bright, exploded in her ribs. But it was a familiar pain, a manageable pain. It was the pain of a training exercise gone wrong, of a hard landing after fast, roping from a helicopter. It was not the sound of bones shattering on concrete. She let her body go limp, absorbing the shock through her trained musculature, sinking into the fault-smelling, yielding cushion of trash. For a long moment, she lay perfectly still in the darkness, listening to the frantic beating of her own heart, waiting for the shouting from above. It came, loud and triumphant. "Holy crap, we actually did it," one of them yelled, his voice cracking with a mix of panic and euphoria. "She's not moving! She's done!" Another chimed in. Then Jake's voice, colder, more assured. "Good. That's what you get for messing with us. Nobody suspends us and gets away with it. Now let's get out of here before anyone sees." Maya lay amidst the coffee grounds and rotting cafeteria food, the stench filling her nostrils. She focused on it, used the sensory overload to ground herself. The suspension, that's what this was about. Yesterday, on her second day, she'd walked into the boys' locker room to retrieve a student she was supposed to tutor. She found Jake and his crew, the self-proclaimed wolves of Northwood, holding a scrawny freshman's head in a toilet, laughing as he struggled. Something in Maya had snapped. Not the teacher, but the soldier. The one who had fought for a country where bullies shouldn't be allowed to reign with impunity. She'd pulled the boy out, her voice calm but leaving no room for argument. She'd written all 5 of them up. The principal, a weak-willed man named Higgins who was more afraid of the football team's wealthy parents than any concept of justice, had given them a 3-day suspension. A slap on the wrist. Apparently, for Jake, even that was an unforgivable challenge to his authority. They thought she was just Miss Thorne, the young, new teacher trying to make a difference. She wore ripped denim shorts and floral blouses over simple bralettes. She had a small, faint scar on her cheekbone that she'd explained away as a biking accident. She looked like she belonged on a college campus, not a battlefield. It was the perfect disguise. Her real mission, assigned by a deep, covert interagency task force, was to get close to the school's beloved football coach, a man named David Croft. They believed he was using his position and the team's extensive travel schedule to move illegal weapons. Croft was a ghost, careful, paranoid. The only way in was from the inside, as a staff member who could observe his routines, his contacts. She was supposed to be invisible, a quiet observer, but seeing that freshman, his face pale and dripping with toilet water, had awakened a fury in her she couldn't suppress. Now, her cover was not just blown, it had been thrown off a roof. She waited until the sound of their retreating footsteps faded. Then, with a grunt of pain, she pushed herself up. Every breath was a sharp reminder of her likely cracked ribs. She climbed out of the dumpster, her clothes stained and reeking. She looked up at the empty rooftop ledge. A cold, grim smile touched her lips. It was the same smile she'd given a warlord in a dusty Afghan compound right before she disarmed him. The mission parameters had just changed. Drastically. To back in her small, sparsely furnished apartment that smelled of stale takeout and gun oil, Maya methodically tended to her wounds. The ripped denim shorts were tossed in the trash. The floral blouse, torn and filthy, followed. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror in her tactical blacks. Her body a roadmap of scars the school kids never saw, a puckered bullet wound on her shoulder, a long, thin slash across her ribs from shrapnel, and the one on her face, which was indeed from a bike, if you considered a shrapnel-laced IED explosion the equivalent of a biking accident. She cleaned the new abrasions, taped her ribs with practiced efficiency, and popped a few ibuprofen. The civilian was gone. The soldier was back. She opened a hidden panel in the floor of her closet. Inside was not a teacher's collection of sweaters and shoes, but a compact arsenal of Siggisour P226, a backup Glock 19, several loaded magazines, a wicked-looking combat knife, and a burned phone. She picked up the phone and dialed a single, encrypted number. A voice, gruff and familiar, answered on the first ring. Orion. Status. Cover is compromised. Command. Maya said, her voice flat, all emotion leached out. The primary subjects of the school environment initiated a hostile action. An attempted termination. There was a long silence on the other end. Say again, Orion, a school kid tried to kill you. Affirmative. 5 hostiles. Male, late teens. They pushed me off the school roof. A low whistle. Jesus. Are you intact? Do you need extraction? Negative on extraction. Maya said, her eyes hardening in the mirror. I am intact, but the mission is now compromised. The principal actor, a student named Jake, believed he was eliminating a disciplinary threat. His actions, however, have created a significant operational security risk. My presence here is now a matter of public record in a violent context. Understood. We'll pull you out. Debrief at 0800 dawn, with all due respect. Sir, Maya interrupted, her voice dropping to a deadly calm. I am requesting a mission parameter change. An extension. Orion, that's not protocol. A blown cover is a blown cover. We extract and reassess. Sir, the primary target, Cocroft, remains operational. My removal now, under these violent and suspicious circumstances, could spook him. He could go to ground. Furthermore, she paused, choosing her words with the precision of a sniper selecting a target. The hostiles who attacked me represent a direct and ongoing threat to the integrity of this operation. They are undisciplined, violent, and believe they are above the law. Their continued freedom of action is a liability I cannot accept. I am requesting permission to neutralize the threat they pose, using it as a new cover for deeper infiltration. There was another long silence. She could almost hear her commander weighing the options. Maya Thorne was one of his best. Impetuous, yes. Prone to righteous anger, absolutely. But her results were undeniable. What's your play, Sergeant? He finally asked, the use of her rank signaling a shift to a tactical discussion. They think they killed a teacher, she said, a plan forming in her mind with crystalline clarity. They're expecting a police investigation, maybe a body. They're not expecting her to walk back into school on Monday morning. They'll be terrified. They'll be confused. And in that state, they'll be vulnerable. I can turn them. Use their fear to get closer to Croft. They're his star players. They have his trust. They have access to him that I never will. The line was silent for a full 30 seconds. It's high risk, Orion. A hell of a gamble. It's the only play we have, sir, and it's personal now. A sigh crackled through the phone. Permission granted. But you are on a very, very short leash. You neutralize the school threat, you get the intel on Croft, and you get out. No cowboy stuff. Understood. Understood, sir. Orion out. She put the phone down. Monday, she had 2 days to prepare. 2 days for the wolves to sweat, to let their guilt and fear fester. 2 days for them to convince themselves they were seeing ghosts. Tukey Monday morning dawned bright and clear. At Northwood High, a strange tension hung in the air. The official story, leaked by Principal Higgins after a frantic, hushed conversation with Maya, was that Ms. Thorne had taken a nasty fall down a flight of stairs over the weekend and was home recovering. It was a flimsy story, but it was all he had. The police were not involved. Higgins had nearly wept with relief when Maya called him, demanding secrecy. He was a coward and she used that. She walked into the school at 7:45 a.m. She wore a simple black turtleneck and dark jeans. Her hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail. The small scar on her cheek seemed more prominent. She moved with a new, purposeful grace that made students instinctively step out of her way. She didn't look injured. She looked dangerous. Her first stop was the cafeteria, where the Wolves always held court before homeroom. Jake was holding forth, bragging about some party, but his eyes were darting, his laughter a little too forced. When Maya stepped into the doorway, the entire room seemed to grow colder. The laughter died in Jake's throat. His face, tanned and cocky, went a sickly shade of pale. His plastic fork, loaded with scrambled eggs, froze halfway to his mouth. His friends Chad, Mark, Tyler, and Bryce looked like they'd seen a ghost. One of them, Chad, actually crossed himself. Maya didn't say a word. She simply made eye contact with Jake. She held his gaze for a long 5-second count. It wasn't a look of anger. It wasn't a look of fear. It was the flat, emotionless gaze of a predator assessing its prey. It was a look that said, "I know, and you are nothing." Then, she turned and walked away, her footsteps silent on the linoleum floor. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic for them. For the rest of the day, they were shadows of their former selves. They jumped at slamming lockers. They flinched when she passed them in the hallway. They spent their time huddled together, whispering frantically. How was she alive? Did she tell anyone? Why wasn't she saying anything? The uncertainty was a psychological torture she was expertly administering. Her opportunity came after the final bell. She intercepted Jake as he was heading to football practice, cornering him in a deserted hallway near the gym. "Jake," she said, her voice quiet but carrying an undeniable authority. He flinched, spinning around. "Ms. Thorne, I heard about your fall. I hope you're feeling better." She took a step closer, invading his personal space. He was a big kid, a linebacker, but he seemed to shrink before her. "We'll both know it wasn't a fall," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "We'll both know what you did. And we both know I should be dead right now." His bravado shattered. "I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, but his eyes were wide with terror. "I have a proposition for you," she continued as if he hadn't spoken. "You and your friends work for me now. You do exactly what I say when I say it. And in return, I won't go to the police and have you charged with attempted murder. I won't show them the security footage from the street camera across the road that clearly shows you pushing me." This was a bluff. There was no camera, but he was in no state to question it. His shoulders slumped. What do you want?" "I want you to be my eyes and ears on this team. I want to know everything about Coach Croft, who he talks to, where he goes after practice. If he has any special deliveries, you bring me any piece of information that seems out of the ordinary. You fail me, you lie to me, you breathe a word of this to anyone." She leaned in, her face inches from his. "And the next time I fall, I'm taking all of you with me, permanently." The threat hung in the air, cold and absolute. Jake, the king of Northwood High, just nodded, a broken marionette. "Yes, Mom." For the next 2 weeks, the Wolves became her unwilling intelligence network. They were terrified, compliant, and surprisingly effective. They reported Croft's strange, late-night meetings with men in nondescript sedans. They told her about the extra equipment he sometimes loaded into the team's gear truck after hours. They were her perfect, unsuspecting spies. Maya was piecing it all together. Croft was using the team's upcoming away game in a border state as a cover to move a significant shipment of illegal firearms. But the pressure was getting to the boys. Jake, in particular, was unraveling. The guilt, the fear, the constant lying, it was eating him alive. He started making mistakes. He was jumpy around Croft, who was no fool. The coach began to notice the change in his star players. He saw the way they flinched when Maya walked by. He saw the furtive looks they exchanged. The breaking point came the night before the big away game. Maya was in her classroom, collating the final pieces of evidence from the boys' reports. It was a perfect storm. Croft had confirmed the shipment was going on the gear truck. Her team was ready to move in and arrest him at the destination. The mission was almost over. The classroom door creaked open. She looked up, expecting one of her student assets. Instead, Coach David Croft stood there, his massive frame filling the doorway. He wasn't wearing his friendly coach smile. His face was a cold, hard mask, and in his hand he held a heavy, steel wrench. "Mims Thorne," he said, his voice a low growl. "Or should I call you something else? I've been having some interesting conversations with Jake. The boy's a mess. He finally broke down and told me a truly incredible story about a teacher who can survive a 4-story drop. A teacher who's been asking a lot of questions about my business." Maya's heart hammered against her ribs, but her face remained impassive. She slowly stood up, putting the desk between them. "I don't know what you're talking about, Coach." "Don't you?" he said, taking a step into the room. "See, I did some digging. Your credentials are good. A little too good. They're perfect. And in my line of work, perfection is a red flag. You're a cop. Or something else." He hefted the wrench. "It doesn't matter. You've been poking around where you don't belong. And now we're going to take a little trip. We're going to get in that gear truck, and we're going to resolve this problem of yours, permanently." He lunged for her. He was big, strong, used to tackling athletes. But he was slow, untrained. Maya didn't try to match his strength. She used his momentum against him. As he grabbed for her, she sidestepped, grabbed his outstretched arm, and used his own charge to slam him face first into the whiteboard with a sickening crunch. He roared in pain and surprise, spinning around, swinging the wrench wildly. It was a clumsy, telegraph swing. Maya ducked under it effortlessly. She moved inside his guard, a blur of controlled motion. Her forearm smashed into his throat in a sharp, debilitating strike. As he gagged, she delivered a crippling blow to his knee, the sound of the impact echoing in the quiet classroom. He collapsed to the floor, writhing in agony, the wrench clattering away. She stood over him, breathing steadily. She pulled a zip tie from her pocket, a habit from her old life, and secured his hands behind his back. She picked up his wrench and looked at it, then at him. "You're wrong, Coach," she said, her voice cold. "I'm not a cop. I'm the reason you check under your bed at night." Just then, the classroom door flew open again. Jake stood there, his face a mess of tears and panic. He was holding a baseball bat. "Coach!" I heard. I had to tell him he was asking too many questions. His eyes fell on Croft, moaning and bound on the floor. His jaw dropped. Maya looked from Jake to the bat, then back to his terrified face. She saw it all then. Not a monster, but a scared, stupid kid who had been allowed to become a monster by a system that worshipped athletes. The rage that had sustained her since the rooftop suddenly felt heavy, exhausting. "It's over, Jake," she said, her voice losing its razor's edge, replaced by a profound wariness. "It's all over." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Her backup, alerted by the silent panic button on her phone, she'd pressed the moment Croft entered the room. As police officers and men in dark suits swarmed the classroom, the final act of the drama played out. Croft was arrested. The boys were taken in for questioning. The story of the weapons ring made the local news, though the details about Maya's involvement were scrubbed, replaced with a narrative of a vigilant teacher. She was debriefed, congratulated, and officially pulled from the field. Her work was done. On her last day at Northwood, she cleaned out her desk. As she was leaving, she saw Jake one last time. He was being led from a police car into the courthouse for his arraignment. He saw her, and for a fleeting moment, their eyes met. There was no hatred there anymore. Just a hollow, broken understanding. He had tried to kill a woman, and in return, she had shown him a glimpse of a world where consequences were real and absolute. It was a lesson far harsher than any suspension. Maya Thorne walked away from the school, the screams from the rooftop finally silent in her mind. She had completed her mission. She had gotten her revenge. But as she slid into the driver's seat of her nondescript sedan, she didn't feel triumphant. She felt tired. She had come to Northwood to hunt a criminal, and she had succeeded. But she was leaving having confronted a different, more insidious kind of evil, one born of privilege, arrogance, and a profound lack of consequence. And as she drove away, leaving the sleepy suburban town behind, she knew that some battles, no matter how many times you won, never truly felt like a victory. This was the story of a woman who fell, only to rise as the very reckoning her attackers feared. A story where the bully met a force of nature they could never hope to understand. If you felt that shock, that tension, that need for justice, then you understand why stories like this matter. And now I have a question for you, one that helps connect this community of viewers who believe in standing up to bullies. From which part of the country are you watching this video? Let me know in the comments below.